Buenos dias. Unfortunately, that's all the Spanish you'll probably get from me, so sorry. But let me start first by explaining the title of this talk. And it wasn't just to get the entire room to go, ¿Cómo se dice swashbuckle? It actually came from a presentation from this guy, the owner of my publication, Jeff Bezos. You may have heard of him. When he opened the new offices that we occupy now, we went into a couple of years ago. He said some very nice things about us. He said, even in the world of journalism, I think the Post is just a little more swashbuckling. There's a little more swagger. There's a tiny bit of badassness here at the Post, and that's pretty special. And so when your owner says you're a swashbuckler, pick up a sword, right? And so, hi, my name's Greg Barber. I'm the director of newsroom product at the Washington Post. What that means is that I manage our software, the tools that the newsroom uses, and I try to make sure that they run well. And that they provide us all of the different tools that we need to be able to tell stories in compelling ways and meet our audience where they want to find us. And the news for the Washington Post right now is very good. People are saying lots of very nice things about us. Our readers seem to be enjoying the stories that we're telling, the ways that we're telling them, the interactions that we have on social media. It's very good news for us. But if I take you back in time, just a little bit, just a few years, you saw stories about the Washington Post that were more like this. So I've been at the Washington Post for about 14 years, and I have seen our evolution when it came to digital and storytelling. And we've actually had problems very similar to what many of your organizations face. When I started at the Washington Post, the print publication was there in downtown Washington, and the digital publication was there in Virginia. There was a literal river between us, and that was perilous for any number of reasons. Safety, if you didn't actually take a road, and also strategy, because it meant that both organizations were operating separately, and I know that some of you have had this experience too. So what changed? Well, first off, we integrated our newsroom so that the print publication and the digital publication are working together. But we also looked at our strategy. What were the main types of storytelling that we wanted to do? What was the audience that we wanted to reach? How were we going to reach them? And what tools were we going to use to do it? We invested in news and research. So we hired reporters. For example, one of the things the Washington Post wants to do is we want to be the dominant voice in politics in the United States. We want to tell political stories. We want to allow our readers to have the best view possible into what's happening in the government in the United States. And so we invested in reporters. We've hired reporters. We've also hired engineers to build tools for those reporters so that we can tell those stories as compellingly as possible. Within our organization now, there's support for innovative ideas. Managers from a level like mine to a level like our editor Marty Barron to a level like our CEO Fred Ryan, all the way up to the top, are supporting the idea of people coming up with innovative ideas, figuring out how those ideas fit into the broader strategy of the Washington Post, and then giving some of those ideas a try and learning from what happens next. And then finally, and really importantly, there's been collaboration across departments. It's not enough anymore for a reporter to just think about, how do I tell this one story that's in front of me? It's important for all of us to think about, how do I tell this story that's in front of me and put it in its broader context and reach an audience that wants to consume it in different ways. And think about how that story contributes to the overall strategy of my department and of my publication, so that we are reaching the maximum number of readers we can, that we're broadening our impact, and that I, as a reporter, am able to reach and convert the audience that I want for my reporting. So we made lots of changes across many departments. We made changes to our journalism in that we hired more journalists. We made changes in engineering. We hired more engineers. But we also got more aggressive and experimental in the kind of engineering that we did. We've also become more ambitious in our engineering, in that we now create engineering products that organizations, including some right here in Buenos Aires, use for their news production. We've become more ambitious in design, and we've become more experimental in the way that we design our products and publish them on different platforms. We've become more ambitious in product. We've really honed in on how a robust product department can really invigorate your process and make it so that there's order and an analytical approach that can make sure that we're using our resources as efficiently and effectively as we can. We've become smarter in sales. We've partnered in different ways with different organizations. For example, we have a program called the Partner Program that allows people in cities other than Washington in the United States to subscribe to their local newspaper and get a Washington Post digital subscription as part of that package. That way we're able to grow our readership, get more readers who then become excited in and interested in the Washington Post, and then who perhaps someday will buy a Washington Post subscription of their own. And we've become more aggressive in advertising. We have a team now that thinks about new advertising products and builds technology to support those products. So it was all about strategy coming together and then breaking down walls to make sure that we were using all of the best assets of our organization toward the goals that we found for ourselves. So how can someone else do this? How can any of you do this in your organizations? Because you don't need a truckload of money in order to make these kinds of changes, because every organization has a strategy and has goals, right? So start by accentuating the positive. Look at your core competencies. Figure out what your goals should be. What audience do you want to reach? What stories do you want to tell? What beats do you really want to own? Then create products that drive you towards those goals. If you want to reach younger readers, you may want to be on Snapchat. You may want to have an increased presence on Facebook. You may want to create stories that have the kinds of depth and multimedia that younger readers expect. Determine how you'll measure success. Go into each one of these initiatives that you have with an idea of how you're going to measure whether that initiative is successful or not. Do you want people to stay on your website longer? Do you want people to consume more pages when they go there? Do you want to bring in new eyeballs, new people to invigorate your readership? Find out what those goals are, set some benchmarks, and then as you're rolling out these new initiatives, measure them against those benchmarks and see if they're moving the metrics that you want them to move, or if there are new metrics that you didn't even think about that they actually are moving instead that are also useful. Scope your resources and draw up a roadmap. So every organization has resources that they consider to be limited, right? There are never enough journalists. There are never enough developers. So prioritizing your initiatives is important. And also keeping in mind which initiatives can build off of the others. That's one of the things that I've tried to do in my role at the Washington Post, is to think about which high priority initiatives we have that actually pair well with other high priority initiatives so that we can get them both done in a faster way. And then finally, execute measuring audience reaction along the way. If it doesn't work for your audience, it doesn't work. If your readers aren't interested in it, your listeners, your viewers, then you need to do something to get them interested in it. So making sure that you have a clear way of feeding back to your readers, that readers have a clear way of feeding back to you, so that you're able to understand how people are receiving the initiatives you put out, and what kinds of things you can do to make that reading experience better. Readers can be very direct, and they can be really helpful as partners, because if they're paying for your product, or they love your product, or they want to investigate your product further, they're going to let you know what it is they like and what it is they don't. And then eliminate the negative. So gauge your success using your metric set. You can adjust your approach. It allows you to adjust while you're doing that work, which is important, because you want to make those changes before your resources go away. And then communicate internally, so that colleagues and supervisors can give input. One of the things that tends to kill projects within newsrooms is apathy, and a management that doesn't understand what you're doing and doesn't see its value is not a partner for you. So make sure that as you're getting ideas together, that you're communicating them in a way that managers and senior managers especially understand, so that they see the value of what it is you're trying to do, and are more likely to support it. And just a quick plug, I've got a workshop later today at 5 p.m. where we can talk through some strategies about how to do that. So what are the kinds of goals that I'm working toward? At the Washington Post, I'm looking to make storytelling more efficient and effective. So to give tools so that our reporters can do their work in a quick, deliberate way, and to make sure that readers are able to see those stories on the devices they choose, in the manner they choose, and that experience is as good as it can be. I'm looking to improve channels for reader engagement. And I'll talk about one of the products I'm using to do that in a second. Spoiler alert, you've just heard a lot about it. Deepening our subscriber roles. So the Washington Post wants more subscribers, right? Just like any newspaper does. So what can we do to make sure that the subscribers that we've got are happy and will renew that subscription? And what can we do to incentivize more people to come in and join us, so that they can take full advantage of the work that we're doing? Ensuring value for subscribers. Making sure that when someone comes in and spends their hard-earned money on the Washington Post, that they see a value for that in the news that they'd like to consume, in the experience that they'd like to have, that it's pleasurable, that they're able to interact with us in ways that bring value to that experience, and that allow them to feel like they're having an impact in the civil discourse. And then finally, broadening our storytelling reach. So are we telling our stories in all the places we should be? Is there a story that would play better on Instagram? Is there a story that would play better on Snapchat? How are we telling stories? How are we in our storytelling? How are we continuing to surprise and delight our readers? These are questions we ask every day at the Post. So a few of the things that we're working on. One of the tools we're working on is called Context. We just actually recently announced an expansion of that tool just this week. We're using it to create cards for football players. Sorry, American football, not the real football. But for each, thank you. For each football player, we have a card that is created. It's shown to readers based on using context. So the reader just clicks on the name of the player, and up pops a card. It's powered by data, by a stream of data that comes in through a service that we use, where we can get statistics about the football player, and and how many points they've scored, and how much they've played in the game, et cetera, et cetera. And then we're able to use another tool to automatically add those links to stories, so that people aren't doing that manually. So now what we're doing is we're providing an extra layer of content for readers that want to see it. We are adding it automatically, so we're not taking up a lot of time with adding all of these links on every story. And we're doing it at scale. We're able to do it for every football player. And that tool helps us now to tell these stories in a way that's much more scalable. Heliograph. So this is a tool that we're using actually in the example that I just gave you. So one of the things that you can get on those football player cards is a story that's written by a machine using the data that we get from our sports data service and templates that were created by our sports department. So for every football player, you get a story, a short story, and one that tells basically how that player has been doing up until this point. And what their statistics are. We're also using this same tool to tell stories about high school football players, the kinds of stories that we just wouldn't be able to tell otherwise. Finally, you may have heard about this project called Coral and a tool that they've got called Talk. We are using that across, we have it in a few places on our website, as you've heard. We're rolling it out across our site. And this is really important to us because it hits on a lot of the goals that we've got, right? Engaging with our readers allows us to provide more value for them, allows them to feel like they're a part of our experience. They are a part of our experience. Allows them to bring more voices into our journalism, which we could always use. And a thing that you may not know about your own readers, and I encourage every one of you who has access to analytics to go back today or right now and look at your analytics to see this, because what we found at the Washington Post is that the people who comment on our site are our most loyal readers, full stop. They subscribe, they come back more often, they stay longer, they are sugar and spice and everything nice. And so rolling out a tool like this that allows them to participate in a comment section that we hope will be more civil and more productive means a better experience for our most loyal users. And that's a win for everyone. So what if we fail? My big boss has a response to that. He says that failure and invention are inseparable twins. To invent, you have to experiment. And if you know in advance that it's going to work, that's not an experiment. Science, right? I've had projects that have succeeded. I've had projects that I hope will succeed. And I've had projects that have failed. And the only failure is not learning from that experiment. And we've had some great successes at the Washington Post. We've had some great failures at the Washington Post. And I think that where we have truly succeeded is when we've learned from both. Any newsroom can do this. You, out there, you can do this. You don't need a lot of money. You don't need a lot of staffing. You just need time to think through your strategy and focus so that you can implement on the goals that you set for yourselves. Pick an audience, pick a beat, really hone in on it, and win it. So, start your adventure. You can do it today. Aim towards your critical goals. Establish clear metrics for success. Experiment and learn from everything that you do. Make sure that each experiment builds on the last. And then communicate internally to maintain your support. And again, we can talk about that more at 5 p.m. right here. So I thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of the day.